You're listening to Booth Talk from the After Movie Diner. And on this episode, we're very happy to have director William McGregor, who is the director of a dark folktale set in the hills of Wales, Gwen, which is a sort of fairy tale-like folk horror, which is sort of seen through the eyes of a child whose mother has an illness and whose farm is being circled by vicious members of the quarry who are looking to buy it and mine it. Along the way, the girl witnesses many misfortunes, or are they man-made evil deeds, befall her family and her farm. The film has some wonderful allegorical moments about healthcare and about unchecked capitalism. It's also an incredible story about the resilience of children, and also the violence that can be done to each other, often in the name of either progress or religion. It is beautifully filmed and fantastically acted. It stars the remarkable Eleanor Worthington Cox, who is just phenomenal in the title role. And we talked to William McGregor about making his first feature film, about setting it in North Wales, about how the rugged terrain can inform the story, and about casting it. So we get into all that and more in this conversation with director William McGregor. Gwen is out on August 16th, this Friday, if you're listening to this week. August 16th, 2019 in the US. So please do get your tickets now and go along and see Gwen when it comes out. We will have a full review on the website to accompany this interview. All right, excellent. Well, I really enjoyed Gwen. I mean, enjoyed might be the wrong word, but it's a really well made, really fantastic film, and very, very gripping and very tense. And I have Welsh relatives, so having been around kind of a lot of Wales and places like that, the atmosphere and the scenery and so on was just incredible. So well done on Gwen, and well done on the reception it's received.
Cheers, man. Thank you. Yeah, it is that thing of what is enjoyment when it's a film like that. But right. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I enjoyed it from a horror fan, from a film fan, from a you know, I enjoyed it from that perspective. So the movie is based on your short film, Who's Afraid of the Water Sprite? And you had made other shorts at the start of your career. Obviously, Water Sprite was very successful at the time, I believe. Cambridge changed a film festival name based on your film. Is that correct? Yeah,
I mean, it was really luck in that regard because we won the first year of the festival, and I think they were looking to rename the festival. So good timing. Yeah,
no, excellent. But was it always intended to be extended to a feature? Or what was it about that story, particularly from the shorts you made at the start of your career, that compelled you to develop it further?
Yeah, it was never really made as a pitch for a feature film. I know a lot of short films are made with that in consideration, you know, a proof of concept almost. But it was very much a student film designed to be a short film, inspired by my love of fairy tales, just researched Eastern European fairy tales, and you know, the short film was born out of that. And it was only because the short film did well and caught the attention of producer Hilary Bevan-Jones that short began to evolve into a feature film. But it very much is a short story. Like it doesn't work as a feature film. It couldn't be a direct translation. So it was using that as a starting point. The story is about a young girl who discovers her mother is a monster and she's trying to help her mother, but she's tricked. And that became the starting point for Gwen, even though it kind of became much more of a, I don't know if you could say realistic, but a more grounded story.
Yeah. No, definitely. I can see that. And also that the mother's situation, to some extent, in Gwen is more ambiguous than definitive. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I think in a short film, it's often about building to a punchline.
Yeah.
And a good scare is a punchline, and that was the end of the short film. Whereas the feature film is asking, not trying to just set up this fable of, a fear of parents. It's asking, well, actually, often aren't you afraid or frustrated when you're told off as a kid, or you don't understand the lies, or there's things that are going on that you can't comprehend, because it's in a way a protection. It was nice to be able to kind of expand on the idea and to kind of question it a bit more, rather than a straight up fairy tale. You could kind of dive into it a bit more.
Yeah, definitely. And there's also that tradition of both fairy tales in general, but also then kind of films of people who are inspired by them, whether it's Terry Gilliam or Guillermo del Toro or something like that, where the child is the focus of the story. Yeah. And Eleanor Worthington Cox in particular has received a lot of attention, and rightfully so, for the film, especially coming out of Toronto Film Festival. Talk about casting her, and indeed just casting the whole film and putting that ensemble together.
Well, I definitely think the film, she's a particular character. It's the world through her eyes. And I think, as you mentioned, people like Guillermo del Toro and even like Neil Gaiman use a young set of eyes to view the world, because it's an innocent perspective that is trying to make sense of strange things happening around them. And I think with Eleanor, someone who could carry the film, but also be the light at the center of the film and be this person that you're putting through. She goes to some quite dark places, so she needed to be, incredibly accomplished actress as well as being, a young woman.
Yeah.
And Eleanor, before working with her, I'd seen her in The Enfield Haunting, which was a Sky Atlantic mini-series, this amazing horror, and she'd also, won an Olivier Award for playing Matilda on the stage in a musical. So even though when I worked with her, she was 16, she was already incredibly experienced, had a huge range and an incredible amount of skill that, you need in order to be able to carry a film like this.
Yeah, definitely. And how involved was she? The sort of the first person you went to and then kind of built the family around her, or did other people come in earlier? And how did you get that sort of family unit to work?
I think timing-wise, we probably found Maxine, just because she's someone I had wanted to work with for a long time and felt she has something very grounded but also very ethereal about her, and she can be loving but also terrifying. And I think a lot of the messages within the film align with her politically, and she has a real love of folk stories as well as myself. So she was just a really good collaborator and ally on the project that we were kind of gunning for quite early on, really. So
Maxine came in first, and then the kind of you built the cast up around her.
I wrote her a letter, basically, kind of begging her to do it.
Nice, very cool, very cool. So obviously, the other big piece of Gwen outside of yourself and the casting is the location. There's something sort of very specific, either about just Western Britain in general, but Wales and the Lake District as well has that feeling. Talk about finding your locations, and then both the pleasures and the pressures of sort of filming on location to quite the extent that you do in the film.
Yeah, well, I mean, the film really grew out of North Wales, because Hilary Bevan-Jones, my producer, who I mentioned earlier, she'd seen the way I'd photographed the Eastern European landscape, but she has a love for North Wales, family there, and this was her fourth production that she's filmed there. And she suggested that I travel to North Wales and have an explore, and this was probably in about 2011.
Yeah.
So I just explored the landscape, really, and often wrote scenes inspired by things that I would find, like the kind of monolithic rock in the middle of that valley. So a lot of it came from the landscape. And I grew up on a farm and always had an interest in how the landscape makes you feel, the atmosphere of a landscape, the eeriness of a landscape. And, you know, the genre elements within the film really grow from there. It is like a kind of pastoral period drama in a way, but then that fear of the land and surviving in this epic landscape sort of leads towards the uncanny and the eerie and builds that sense of dread through the landscape, which is sort of a part of being inspired by the wilderness of North Wales, really.
Yeah, no, definitely, and it's compelling as well. I love seeing these films. I mean, obviously, I'm English originally. I now live in New York, but I love seeing these films travel from either Britain or Europe or whatever. That both, first of all, are common stories. So they can kind of speak to anyone from anywhere, but also that kind of show the world different parts of itself, if you know what I mean. Like people from America being able to kind of see North Wales and kind of some of the other landscapes that they might not be so familiar with is always good.
Yeah.
We've mentioned a lot in this so far about the folk stories and folk horror, and it's interesting that sort of folk horror is on the rise again right now. You know, there are these stories about a time before technology, definitely, but also a time where kind of belief in spirits, the church, and a misunderstanding of healthcare and medicine and so on were also very kind of common. All themes that kind of come up in Gwen. Why do you think, first of all, that stories like this are coming back? And is there any commentary on today in any way, or were you just interested in the story and people can take what they want from that?
Well, I kind of believe that I come from a standpoint that interpretation is from the viewer, that the power of the power of interpretation is not me as a director saying it's about this, it's just whatever people take from it. But obviously you, through your voice, are trying to say something. It's just whether people, what element they take away, whether it is purely a mother-daughter relationship or whether people take away any commentary about the NHS or any commentary about free healthcare or capitalism, or that is all there to be kind of played with if that's what people can get their teeth into. And I think that's probably why folk horror is of interest to people, because as a filmmaker, I wasn't really like aiming to be a part of a wave or as a part of like a movement. It was more just I have a love for this type of storytelling, and like I say, coming from a rural part of the world, I think landscape has always inspired me. But I definitely think the darker the time you're living in, for whatever reason, be it we're all absorbed by our screens or we kind of lacking a freedom and we want to get back to a landscape, I think that's definitely compelling for me to want to read and experience these stories or watch these stories. And I think it's a reason why films like this are able to get made, because there's a proven audience for this type of film.
Yeah.
I think as an escape.
Yeah, no, definitely. And obviously horror has always lived to some extent. And I don't categorize this just as a sort of pure horror. There's obviously other aspects to it. But horror or sinister storytelling has always taken place in those kind of gothic areas or those gothic times, and it was just interesting to kind of see that those films kind of come back around, recently. So a couple of last quick questions then. First of all, sort of what films or books or music or anything influenced you in making Gwen the way that you did?
Sure, I think a lot of the writing of Thomas Hardy, and then in terms of literature as well, Angela Carter's Bloody Chambers, like her reimagining of fairy tales. But then there is a folk horror foundation in there with Unholy Trilogy, like Blood on Satan's Claw and The Witfinder General and The Wicker Man. And then the one thing I like about folk horror is how it can be quite, if you dive down this tunnel and you find all kinds of different things. So I really like some of the 60s and 70s BBC Play for the Day or Christmas ghost stories.
Yeah.
So like Pender's Fen or like Robin Redbreast and some of the M.R. James stuff. And I really love The Innocents, which I know isn't one of those, but just going on M.R. James. But that type of thing kind of all sort of fed into the story, and even some like Czech new wave stuff, because I think like Witchhammer and it's later, but Valerie and her Week of Wonders. There's something, I don't know, that period in the Czech they were having to make a statement, but without it being obvious, because they're still under Soviet rule. So they're using these sort of fantasies and this symbolism and going back through their history to make these quite bizarre folk stories. And I'm kind of I find those really inspiring as well.
So yeah, just the last question then, William, is what's next in terms of feature films for you? And do you think you'll stick in the horror genre or in the kind of folk story genre, or do you have other ideas to branch out beyond those genres?
Yeah, I'm writing a second film with the producers of Gwen and Beer Feigen, and also I've just had notes from Film 4, so I'm doing another pass on the script now, and that is a genre piece. It's a revenge thriller, but it's about a gamekeeper, and he's dealing with these poachers who basically are involved in this blood sport, badger baiting. So it's genre, but it's like grounded in landscape, and I think that's something that I'm always going to be interested in. So it's still got folk elements to it, really, but it isn't really a folk horror. No,
and is that a contemporary piece or a period piece?
Yeah, so I'm writing it as a contemporary piece. So it's almost about how, as a modern individual who's doing this job as a gamekeeper, you're slightly disconnected from modernity. At the same time, everyone's moving on and treats the landscape in a different way to you, and you're kind of, this character's under the shadow of the people that have gone before him. So it's quite an interesting contemporary story, because it is sort of stuck in that shift away from, kind of like we were talking about earlier, why people are interested in folklore, really, in that shift away from the land.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, we'll look forward to that when that comes out, and all the best with your future career, William. As I said, Gwen is fantastic and atmospheric and different, and definitely one that we'll be suggesting people check out when it hits these shores in August. So thanks so much for your time today, and all the best.
Thanks, John. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Take care. Bye now. And if you've liked this interview, you can find other interviews like it over at aftermoviediner.com, like the recent interview by our contributor Aaron Carruthers with none other than Michael Madsen, one of the many stars of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, currently in the cinema in the US and about to hit the cinema this week in the UK. So check out our Michael Madsen interview. It's fantastic. It's really in-depth. Check that over at aftermoviediner.com. Also, if you've enjoyed this show, don't forget to look up Booth Talk on iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, wherever podcasts are found, and rate and review us. You can also support the show by going over to patreon.com/aftermoviediner. That's patreon.com/aftermoviediner. Thanks so much for listening. Look forward to our next interview very soon.